Okay, so first a reminder that the projects are due on Wednesday, and you should be handing them in as hard copy in class on Wednesday. I'm going to have we're going to have a guest lecture on Wednesday. I'm actually going to be talking to the PBS children's TV producers on Wednesday in Washington, D.C., so which should be cool. So influencing the children's TV for all those children seems like it's worth traveling all the way to Washington to do. Unfortunately, we have Auden Dahl, who's an absolute expert in moral development, which is what we're talking about this week, who actually studies moral development, and he's going to be giving a guest lecture on Wednesday. But the GSIs are going to be here. Bring a good old-fashioned hard copy of your project to class on Wednesday, and that's when it's due. And we'll send out an email about the late policy later on. But at the moment, just assume that it's due on Wednesday, and you should have it there as a hard copy by Wednesday. We can't, as you can imagine, given the number of submissions that there are, it would just be hopeless for the GSIs to be sitting there and printing them all independently. So we won't accept it by email. You'll have to do it as a hard copy, and the hard copy date the hard copy is due end of class on Wednesday. Okay, any other questions about that? Okay, you should be able to hear. Okay. Oh no, the spinning wheel of death. Yikes. Okay, let's see if we can get out of this. Ah, even worse. All right, let's try again. Yeah, right. There we go. Okay, good. Okay, let's hope this works this time. Okay, great. Okay, so what we're going to do today is talk about, today and next week is we're going to talk about moral development. And the question about how we develop our moral understanding and intuitions about the world is actually quite an old one, and you can see it's quite an important one. In fact, it's one of those developmental psychology questions that you could trace all the way back to the beginnings of philosophy. Are we really natively good and get corrupted by the world around us, or are we really natively evil and bad and rely on the moral conventions and rules of society to make us good? That's one of the oldest philosophical and theological questions you could ask. And for a long time, the general picture was sort of the second one, the we're all born bad or at least born amoral, and then very gradually and over a long period of time develop our moral sensibilities and intuitions. So Piaget, for example, thought that children really didn't have a sense of morality in the sense that we did until very, very late in their development. And he pointed to things like the fact that sometimes children would make judgments about how bad something was based on outcomes rather than based on intentions. So, for example, children would say that if you accidentally broke 20 plates, that was worse than if you intentionally broke 1 plate. And Piaget thought that showed that children didn't actually understand about morality. Now, of course, even for adults, we make moral judgments based on outcomes as well as intentions. So, for example, someone who actually kills someone when they're driving drunk is guilty of manslaughter, and someone who just drives drunk is guilty of drunken driving, even though they're doing exactly the same thing. So, one point is that it's not so clear that our adult moral judgments don't actually take outcomes into consideration. And Piaget also thought that children were initially making their moral judgments based on what their parents said, or what parents approved of, or what parents and other authority figures said was good or not on their own intrinsic judgments. And in fact, he thought that something like genuine morality didn't appear until well into adolescence. And after Piaget, Lawrence Kohlberg, who was also a psychologist, kind of inspired by Piaget, actually argued that even adolescence wasn't late enough. He thought that some aspects of morality might not even develop until adulthood, and that they didn't develop at all in some adult humans compared to other adult humans. So his view was that our understanding of morality was really a very, very late attainment indeed. And that led to, as you can imagine, that was a kind of controversial idea, and it actually led to a debate in the 70s between Kohlberg and Carol Gilligan, a psychologist who was part of early feminism. Why did Kohlberg think that some adults didn't have a notion of morality? Well, for Kohlberg, the definition of morality was that you had abstract rules that applied in all circumstances. So the way that Kohlberg decided to test whether people were moral or not was by giving them vignettes. So things like Hans's child is very, very sick, and Hans doesn't have any money. Is he justified in actually stealing the medicine that he needs to help his child to get better? And then he saw how people provided justifications for those kinds of moral dilemmas. And what Kohlberg was looking for was general principles that applied across all circumstances. So he thought that the criterion for being moral was if you said in that case either stealing is always wrong, you should never steal, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, or else you might say, well, it's more important to help someone to get well, that's more important than stealing, so you should always steal. And what Kohlberg found was that many adults, and Gilligan thought more women than men, said in those kinds of cases would say, well, it depends. It depends on what the doctor's like. It depends on whether he can get the medicine another way. It depends on whether it's his child or someone else's child. So in other words, some people seem to give these much more contextual descriptions of what happened in a moral dilemma. And Kohlberg said that if you gave that kind of contextual description or explanation or justification, that didn't count as actually being moral reasoning. And Gilligan pointed out that that was just as much a form of moral reasoning, and you might argue a more sensitive, sophisticated, complex form of moral reasoning than just a form of moral reasoning that said either it's good or it's bad. And it's always, if it's good, it's always good, and if it's bad, it's always bad. Now, an interesting kind of sub-story about this is that it actually turns out that there aren't really differences between men and women in these judgments. So this is one of those cases where everyone's intuition was that women would be more contextual and more sensitive to context and more variable than men. But actually it turns out that if you do studies, there actually aren't striking differences in moral judgment between men and women. But Gilligan's point nevertheless held. So even if you aren't seeing these as being differences between men and women, it is true that some people, both men and women, give these more contextual justifications for morality. And there's a good argument to be made that that's just as sensitive, in fact maybe more sophisticated kind of moral reasoning than the moral reasoning that just says there's an abstract rule and either you follow it or you don't follow it. So the background for this was that people thought that even while the debate was going on about adults, Piaget's assumption that babies and young children were amoral and didn't have moral sensibilities kind of went unchallenged until the 1980s and most recently in a whole new set of experiments. And what people have found is surprisingly strong early precursors to much of what we think of as moral reasoning or moral action, even in infants, even in very young children. Now, part of the trouble with this literature is that, as years and years of philosophy have shown, it's not completely obvious even for adults. And as that Kohlberg and Gilligan discussion has shown, it's not completely obvious even for adults what counts as being genuinely moral behavior or genuinely moral judgment versus not moral judgment or behavior. So let me give you an example to start out with. Remember that when we talked about infant theory of mind and imitation, one of the things that we saw is that even very young infants are capable of empathy. So even very young infants, arguably even newborns, already take on the emotions that they feel somebody else express. So if the baby sees somebody else being upset, then they get upset. If they watch someone's face and they're sad, then the babies will make a sad face and show signs of a sad emotion. So even tiny infants, 2 or 3 months old, already seem to be feeling the emotions of other people. There was a study that just came out, I think, last week that showed that when you did ERP studies of even sleeping babies, electrical studies of their brain activity, if the people around them were quarreling, the baby's brain activity looked different, even when the babies were asleep, which suggests that babies, as we've seen, are very, very, very sensitive to emotion and seem to take on the emotions of other people. And in many traditions, that kind of empathy is at the core of what we mean by morality. So all the injunctions about loving your neighbor as yourself, or having the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, all those kind of basic moral ideas really center on the fact of treat the other person as if they were like you. So treat the other person as if they had the same kinds of feelings and emotions that you do. So we might argue then that this kind of immediate empathy, this ability to identify with the feelings of another person, is at least a kind of ground for morality that seems to be in place even very early. But empathy isn't really all of what you see in what constitutes morality, because it's perfectly possible to feel that about somebody else, but not do anything to help them, right? So feeling your pain isn't really what you want from someone. What you want is not so much about feeling somebody else's pain. You want someone to do something to alleviate the other person's pain. So you could think about this difference between empathy, which is just feeling the way the other person feels, and altruism, which is actually doing things at your own cost to help the other person to feel better. And again, altruism is something that people thought was not available in children until really late, and more experiments show that that's not true. First of all, a bunch of just observational studies that were done in the 1980s showed that when children get to be about 18 months old, interestingly, after they pass that Mark test that shows that they understand who they are themselves, they start to spontaneously behave in an altruistic way. And in The Scientist in the Crib, I tell the story about Bunny, who you're seeing in the tapes, and I came home from work one day and I was exhausted, and one of the students had complained about grades, so I was a really terrible teacher, and a journal had turned down one of my articles, so I was a completely hopeless researcher, and the chicken legs for dinner was still frozen, so I was a totally terrible mother, and I did what any good, tough-minded, professional working woman would do in those circumstances, and laid down on the sofa and started to cry loudly. And what happened was that Buddy, who was then about 22 months old, looked at me in a concerned way, so his empathy kicked in. But not only did his empathy kick in, he went to the bathroom and got a box of Band-Aids and started putting the Band-Aids all over me. So he hadn't quite figured out exactly what the best solution to this problem was, but he's now just finished a degree in clinical psychology and is about to become a clinical psychologist. And I think the moral of this is sometimes you can be a really good therapist, even if the theory about your therapy isn't completely sound. So it was actually really good therapy and made me much happier. Now, that sounds like it's a story about a particularly adorable child, and as I say, if you've been seeing the videos, you can see he really was and continues to be a completely adorable child. But it turns out that that's actually quite typical of 18-month-olds to 2-year-olds. So you start seeing spontaneous things like giving presents or helping someone who's unhappy, starting at about 18 months old, just in everyday observation. When Augie and I go for a walk now that he's 18 months, one of the things that's very important we do is find little pebbles that we can bring back as presents for my husband, for Grandpa. So we have to make sure that we bring back presents for Grandpa, and then we very ceremoniously give Grandpa the presents, which are little pebbles from the street after we come home. And Grandpa is very appreciative. We have a large collection of them in our front room. The important point is that that's not something that Augie would have done in the same way just a couple of months ago. Now, these are all just observations and anecdotes, and one of the important slogans in psychology is that the plural of anecdote is not data. Could you actually show that children do this in a more systematic way? And this is what Felix Warneken set out to do. So here's an example of one of Warneken's experiments. He's at the University of Harvard. What he did was very simple but very elegant. What he did was just show children someone trying to get something, and then he saw what the babies did. And here's an example of one of these experiments. So what you can see is, and this is the same sequence from different angles. And that's the baby in the corner. Aww.
Kann ich einen Brief schreiben?
So what you can see is not only did the baby come and give her the pen, but the baby looked at her for a long time, and the baby actually was even willing to climb over all of those cushions to get over to her and give her the pen. And then the lovely control experiment they did was when the experimenter dropped the pen intentionally on the floor, threw the pen intentionally on the floor, so actually she didn't want the pen. And when she did that, then the babies didn't come and give her the pen, they just figured she didn't want the pen, so they left it there. Here's, these tapes are so cute. Here's another example.
So, warte mal hier. Oh.
Oh, yes.
Ja.
And in other kind of follow-up experiments that Warneken and colleagues have done, they've shown, for instance, that it doesn't really matter whether there's another person observing a parent being there or not, doesn't make a difference. So it isn't just that the children are trying to do it to please the parents. They spontaneously and genuinely seem to be wanting to help the other person. And interestingly, you don't see the same kinds of behaviors, although you see pieces of them, you don't see the same full-fledged behaviors when you do the same experiments with chimpanzees, which is something else that Warneken did. Okay, so that's about babies actually being altruistic. How about babies judging whether other people are being altruistic or not? And people have used the habituation experiments that we've talked about a lot in class to try and test this too. So here's an example from work by Kylie Hamlin, who's used those kind of videos and habituations to try to see whether children are being altruistic or not.
A red circle guy.
All right, let's get back a little bit.
Levels into the lab. At the other side of the long table is a hill stage. A red circle guy with googly eyes tries to climb the hill. He sort of goes up the hill, then falls back down. He always fails at it. Then a blue square character, also with googly eyes, comes from the bottom of the hill and bumps him up to the top of the hill so that he's successful. On different trials, the climber tries again to get to the top of the hill, and then a yellow triangle character comes down from the top and bumps him to the bottom of the hill, so prevents him from getting his goal. Babies see this a number of times until they get nice and bored with it, so we stop and basically do a choice measure. Moms are asked to close their eyes. an experimenter who did not see which character was which brings over the two characters to the babies and just sees which character the baby touches first.
Which one do you want?
We found that, impressively actually, almost 100% of babies preferred the more positive character.
What do you want?
Okay. They seem to have attraction to helpful, pro-social individuals and also a real aversion to antisocial, unhelpful individuals. Babies are fascinated by the social world.
Hey, buddy. Hey, Holland.
Okay. So there's an example of an experiment using the other, there's an experiment using the habituation experiment, which suggests that the babies not only are being altruistic and helpful themselves, helping other people to get their goals, but it also suggests that the babies are discriminating between other people who are being helpful and altruistic versus other people, or at least other little wiggly things with eyes on them, that are hindering. And if you think back to what we talked about in the cognitive development section about babies, remember the teddy bear experiment where babies understand that someone's reaching for something? What that suggests is that by the time they're 7 months old or so, babies really seem to understand people's goals and intentions very well. And what both of these experiments suggest is that babies seem to think that if someone has a goal or an intention, something they want to achieve, then other people will or should help them to achieve the goal that they want to achieve. So that's sort of like the baby's default assumption, is that if you're trying to get something, then other people will cooperate with you and should cooperate with you, including the baby themselves, in trying to get the thing that you're trying to obtain. Okay, let's do an explanation break here. So turn to your neighbor and explain the difference between empathy and altruism, and also how you think those two might be connected. So how might you become altruistic if you just start out being empathic, which seems to be the developmental sequence? Okay, let's get started again. That's obviously a topic of some discussion. I should say, I think, in fact, I've written about this a little bit in my new book. I do think that it's interesting that that empathy seems to be something that comes first, and also that when you look across so many different moral traditions, the idea that somehow the core of morality is experiencing other people's pain or experiencing other people's pain and pleasure and goals as if they were like your own. So it does seem to be something that's a very core idea across many, many different moral traditions. And I think it's interesting that that many kind of moral exercises, when you're looking at, say, Christianity or Buddhism, try to cultivate morality by getting you to try to take the perspective even of somebody who's your enemy, someone who you would normally be alienated from. So in the Buddhist tradition, for example, one of the sort of basic moral exercises is you start out by just trying to think about, someone who you really love, like your child, imagine all the love and compassion that you feel for that child, and then imagine someone who's a stranger and try to feel the same way, and then imagine someone who's your enemy who you really hate, and see if you can generate the same kind of feeling. And I think that idea implies something about the way that this fundamental perspective taking and empathy underpins a lot of our moral intuitions. But of course, that's not all that's going on in morality. Remember, I said that one of the things that Piaget thought was that children's first ideas about morality might just be ideas about what other people approve of or what other people don't approve of. And in fact, Piaget thought that the idea that morality was more than just convention wasn't something that children developed until they were well into adolescence. And in fact, back in the 80s, there was a wonderful set of experiments that, oddly enough, sort of have sat there. People hadn't really followed up on very much, which suggested that wasn't true. These were actually done by Judith Matana and